Can I do something to become enlightened? Dong, dong, dong. Can you do something to become enlightened? No. You cannot do anything to become enlightened. Firstly, you don't exist. So this idea that there's a you there that could do something to become enlightened is simply an idea and not an actuality. So this idea that there is you that could do something is a lie. And secondly, there is no body to enlighten. So who would become enlightened? Who are you? So you have an idea that who you are is something moving through time, and that is the illusion. That is what creates separation. This idea that you walked into this room, you sat down, you turned on the computer, you watched me on live stream, then afterwards you went off and you had a pizza and a beer and went for a walk with the dog. The idea that that's you is the lie. That's not who you are. There is no solid entity. In every moment, there's thoughts, feelings appearing, giving the impression that there is somebody inside your body. So have you ever seen this person? Have you ever got it out of the body and looked at who you are? And what is your experience right now is a timeline looking out of your eyes. Is somebody that came from the past and is going to the future sitting here? Or is there only presence, this awake conscious presence here? And in that awake conscious presence comes all thoughts and feelings and ideas and images of you. What happens is there seems to be this mechanism in the human where thoughts arise, ideas arise, feelings arise, and then there's this consciousness, which is who you are, and all of it gets sucked inside the body, and it makes it feel like you are somebody inside the body, that you're looking out at the world. And that's not true. You're not looking out of the world. What is looking out of the world is this empty looking, is this sense of being, this sense of amness, this sense of aliveness, and this emptiness, this consciousness that has no place, has no form, is no thing but everything. And you'll notice that that sense of being and consciousness is in every experience. You're never without that. The idea of you changes, the feeling of you changes, the emotions of you change, the thoughts of you change, the body changes, but these two remain the same and are always present in every experience. But still, the human clings onto an entity that's always changing and moving and never actually is. It's always an imagination. This imagination always feels dissatisfactory. Did I say that right? Unsatisfactory, I think, not dissatisfactory, unsatisfactory. So imagining that you are someone always feels wrong. It feels like a lie. It doesn't sit well. And it creates a sense that you've lost something, which in a way you have, because prior to identifying with the body, you were everything. You were this emptiness that's experiencing itself, this innocence. And then when you identify with the body and thoughts and feelings and ideas, there's a sense that there's something wrong. the sense there's something not quite right. So what happens in that mechanism is it looks in the only place it can in time for its salvation. So it looks in the past, it looks in the future for something that can make it feel better. And then it begins to get obsessed with this pleasure, pain, polarities of the human. So the human has this system that encourages us to move towards pleasure and away from pain. And then this seeker, this person, this illusion that feels like there's something not quite right here, begins to lock on to pleasure and believe that, well, what the problem is that I don't have enough pleasure, I don't have enough happiness, I don't have enough joy, I don't have enough money, I don't have enough freedom, I don't have enough lovers, I don't have enough sex, whatever it is. And I need to get more of that in the future. And if I got more of that in the future, if I got all those things, or I got like 10% or 20% of those things, then I would be happy and I wouldn't feel uncomfortable, I would feel comfortable again. And this is what all humans are doing. Everybody is chasing this idea of salvation in the future. When I was studying playwriting, they always used to say that the fundamental story is the Jesus story, this idea of the Savior. This is the fundamental story in humanity. And this is the game you're always playing. You're always waiting for a human, for a thing, an object, money, experiences to save you, to satisfy you. And it's never coming. In fact, that belief in the game, that perpetuation of the game, increases the game, makes you feel even more like you haven't got it, because you keep looking, keep not getting it. So what it does is it speeds up and it gets more and more. When you were younger and the game started, the game was quite exciting or fun, but as you got older, it got more heavy and uncomfortable. I just have to So how could this person become enlightened when this person doesn't actually inherently exist? Who would become enlightened? How can that person get to consciousness when the person is always coming and going in consciousness, and consciousness and presence is what's fundamentally here? we begin to, as seekers, seekers of the truth, there tends to be a dynamic where you believe that if you recondition yourself, if you do something, then you will get to non-duality. That if you start challenging your behaviors, if you do the chakra breathing, if you work on the personal self, if you go to special gurus with really strong energy, if you go on retreats, that you'll get to non-duality, that you can make it to non-duality. But who? It's impossible. You can't get to non-duality. You are non-duality. That which looks out of your eyes now is non-duality. This presence, there's always presence. You can't get out of it. You can try and run as much as you like I'm going to get away from consciousness. And you're always in consciousness. There's always consciousness. There cannot be a leaving of it. There cannot be a removal from it. You are that. And what comes and goes is this daydream, this illusion of you. And then you think that you can work on the body to release that illusion. I think that if you're really, really full of self, if there's a lot of suffering and difficult emotions and difficult ideas in the system, then it's more than likely harder to hear non-duality because there's so many clouds in the way. But it's not anybody that hears non-duality. You're not going to release your karma about your friends or your father or your relationship to women or your relationship to money or to God or to society and get to non-duality. You're not going to have that emotional discharge and suddenly get rid of all emotions and arrive in some bliss. Non-duality means the acceptance of all emotions. There's nothing that cannot happen. It's not something personal. It doesn't belong to you. It doesn't mean that you're going to get to a place where you stop having karma or you stop having emotional reactions. There's so many people that teach that, but I think it's out of a fantasy of the teacher or out of an emotional deadness of the teacher. The body's still going to have its reactions. Over time, it will evolve and expand more and more to the realization, but it's not suddenly just going to realign all the neural pathways in the body and in the mind. We think of ourselves as somebody, so it's we're going to get enlightened and we're going to stop being angry, but actually the anger and the disharmony with your work colleagues is neural pathways and energies inside the body that aren't just going to shift like that. It's not that. That isn't awakening. That's something that you do, this reconditioning. And yeah, non-duality, the realization of it can recondition you to make you a better you. But that's not the point. I keep smelling this funny smell on things. Is it my nose? I won't tell you what it smells like. See, sometimes I'm unsure of the level of honesty in which I should be on YouTube. There's an unsureness because I don't mind it in person and when I'm not being recorded, this level of honesty. But when you're being recorded, I don't know. There's certain things that I hold back in my personality. I think I say a lot more juicy things in person. Yeah. When you begin broadcasting on YouTube regularly or using social media regularly, you realize there's some dark energies out there that you want to stay away from. And so saying really honest things, dark energies are okay, back to non-duality. So So any emotion can arise in awakening. It's not about having a peaceful mind. It's not about having peaceful reactions or not arguing with your partner anymore, or having the perfect children, or the perfect life. It's not about that. Or stress not arising because of bills. It's not that. Believing it's that will perpetuate the seeker, because you're always looking, what you're actually looking for is a perfect you and a perfect life, and that is seeking. It's this idea that one day you're going to arrive. It's not that. What is here now? What never leaves? What's not separate from everything? And this isn't an intellectual realization. There can be intellectual realizations, and there can be all these like different awakenings and shifts that happen, but it's not an intellectual awakening, and it's an energetic shift from being a person to being consciousness, or the experiencer, which is everything. You could say everything experiencing itself, whichever you like. Not a consciousness that's removed from all things, a consciousness that is all things, and it's an energetic shift. And it happens because it happens. It's unknowable. It's something that happens. It normally, more than likely, follows a cause and effect to an extent. Like I know, and I have met people that it happens randomly to, where they're just living their life, and then there's suddenly this energetical shift. And then I've met lots and lots of people also that follow some form of teaching, non-dual teaching, and then this shift happens. And I've spoken to quite a few people that had a shift while listening to me speak. It's not me though that did it. It's nothing to do with me. It just so happens that it was remembered. It was grace. I mean, how can you describe that mystery of why it happens? And in another way, you can say that it never happens, because there's always it's always consciousness experiencing itself. There's just an illusion that arises inside consciousness, but consciousness is not disturbed. Consciousness can never get disturbed. It's no thing, or presence, if you prefer presence, or aliveness cannot get disturbed, because it's not a thing. It has no qualities to it. It's absolutely empty of every quality, but yet it is all things. It's in everything. It's like you think that you're sitting as a body inside a body watching the room, but actually there is simply the room. There isn't a location inside the body. It's an idea that gives it a feeling that there's a location in the body. It's ideas that make it feel like this repetition of you, that there's somebody here. Just like when you have lots of anger, you feel it in your body. Like you have lots of angry thoughts, like they're an asshole, they did this to me, and then you have lots of angry thoughts and blaming thoughts. You feel it in your stomach, or you feel it in your heart, you feel it in your body. The you story has been happening for many generations, and so it's a genetical thing. And then also as soon as you're born, you kept being told you're in there, so then you're suddenly like, yes, I'm a person that's experiencing inside the body. But as a baby, there was just innocence. There wasn't a sense that this is my hand, this is my hand, this is my nose, and I'm in relationship to the world. There was simply the world experiencing itself. It didn't even have a body, the baby. It didn't even know it was a baby experiencing through a baby the world. As you get older, and when the awakening happens when you're older, it's seen that life is looking through these bodies, but it's at the same time not really. It's experiencing itself just from a particular angle, seemingly. But then also, when you're just sitting looking at the sunset, there is no angle, there is only sunset. All this idea of angle or location or divide or you and me is simply ideas that humans have embedded into their psyche. Me, mine. And it most probably formed when we began to use language, when we began to herd, when we began to have properties. So when we began to keep animals, we began to have property, and then there began to be this mine. This is mine, this is yours. And we began to label things, and what was yours, You have the body, you have your thoughts, you have your feelings, you have your wife, you have your husband, you have your children, you have your animals, you have your home, and all of that belongs to you. And then this keeps being indoctrinated into us, generation. But prior to humans being able to speak, prior to language forming, who was experiencing the world? They didn't have language. They didn't have the ability to say mine or me or he or her or she or anything else. So who did they think they were? Who were they imagining themselves to be? If they couldn't speak and they couldn't think, they couldn't look in a mirror and be like, that's me. Oh, aren't I pretty? How would they think that? How would they know that? How? There is just watching happening and innocence. It's so hard to imagine, though. I remember once, and I said to my dad, we were talking about dogs, and my dad really wasn't into non-duality at all. Neither of my parents are into the subject. And I remember I was walking along, and he said, the dog thinks this. And I said, but Dad, how would the dog think without language? And he was like, don't be ridiculous. Dogs can think without language. And I agree that there is some form of images that arise, but how can they think? How can they string the sentence together like, oh, what a beautiful window that is? How do they think that? There could be an image of a window and a sensation of pleasure. There can be some sense of time, but they can't actually think. Thinking requires speaking. It could be that we don't understand dog language. I mean, they do have language amongst each other, but it's not complex enough in order to be claiming who they are and saying, oh yes, my name is Khaleesi and I have beautiful ears and a beautiful face, and my owner is a sucker. She always does everything I want. I just have to bark and stamp my foot and there she comes running. She really can't think like that. It's just innocence experiencing. But it's so hard to imagine. Like, my dad was a very intelligent man. He was a computer programmer that wrote programs for companies with 500, 600, 700 employees, and he'd write the whole thing. He was very intelligent and very capable, but he couldn't imagine, like, he just thought I was ridiculous that a dog couldn't think. Like, it was a ridiculous, preposterous idea that animal couldn't think. So to most of society, and maybe even to you're listening, like, it doesn't mean that you're stupid or that you don't understand concepts, but we're so used to personifying everything, to projecting human mentality onto everything. We can't imagine that other animals don't think or don't identify like we do. And if they don't identify, if they don't think, they don't identify with their body. And I know your mind is like, how is that possible? But then who are they? If they don't imagine themselves as a body, like, you imagine yourself as a body. So if I asked you who you are, you'd start naming the body, your feelings, your financial balance, your house, what your personality is like, how your emotions are, what people think of you, what you think of yourself. You'd name all these things, and then you have an image held in your brain of, like, thin or fat or blonde or white or black or beautiful or ugly. And then you're always imagining that when you're referring to yourself. But if you're an animal and you can't think, how can you imagine yourself as a body? Like animals, some animals, there's about 5, I think, that can recognize themselves in the mirror in some way, but most can't. So who do they think they are? Ooh. The smell. Might be a washcloth or something that I haven't cleaned enough. You know, when you have a washcloth for a few days or a week or so. Yes, what was I going on about? So who do they imagine themselves to be? Who? Who let the dogs out? Who? If they can't think, if they can't speak, then when they look out, they don't think, I have a nice fluffy tail, I am a beautiful wolf. They just are. They are experiencing that innocence. Like when you're creating art or when you're doing something you really enjoy, you completely forget yourself and you just are. There just is this consciousness that's not like thinking about itself. It's simply experiencing innocently. And it's not actually divided, but your mind can't comprehend that. In those moments, your consciousness begins to expand. That's why it feels like joy. That's why we get addicted to doing these activities in which we lose ourselves. Because it feels like joy, but actually what it is the disidentification with the body, which is freedom. It's not actually, it does produce joyful feelings in the body, but that's a lie to think that's it. It's actually this expansion that who you are is empty of feeling, empty of emotion, empty of thoughts, empty of anything. It's just love. It's content. It's totally content in itself, as itself. And it's there all the time looking out. So back to the question, who gets enlightened? Consciousness is always here. What stands in the way is this idea of somebody that can get enlightened. Who gets enlightened? Okay, I take some questions now. I've blabbered on.